Hello and welcome to my build video of the brand new Tamiya Land Rover Defender 90. It's just come through the post and we'll get started with step one. Step two is building up the front differential. Now with the CC01 you can actually lock the rear diff. There's factory supplied bits to be able to lock the rear diff, but there's nothing to lock the front diff. Now where I'm planning on taking this for my first run video, I think I'm really going to need front diff locked as well, using one of these little planetary gears. So I'm going to have a go at that. And to lock the diff, it's got to go in there and seat in with them. And like I say, they do say it's quite tricky to do. Let's try that. I think that may be in. And there we have one locked diff that I can take apart and unlock as and when I please. Step 13 is assembling the rear differential. Now there's two ways you can install this. The first way is using the crown gears and the planetary gears to give you a normal differential, but Tamiya also supply two separate pieces called G5 that enable you to lock this diff without anything, if you know what I mean, like we did in the earlier one. So obviously that's the way I'm going to go. So I've got my two plastic pieces, so we'll just get cracking. Step 15 is basically building the actual rear axle. So we've got the differential and the two prop shafts, but before I actually start, I just want to show you something. If we pop these in here like so until it fits, there we go. You'll see if I hold this and get it a bit closer for you, how much movement there is in that. Ridiculous really. And so on. And it's the same the other side, which I think is unacceptable really. So what I come up with for this one anyway, I think the last time I'd got more of these washers that fit over, so I was able to use them, but I've only got that one. But what I have found is these, like, they're basically like mini key rings. They're spring steel in a loop, and I've managed to get one of these, oops, over the shorter shaft and push down, and that's a really tight fit. So we can then put the other bits on, I'm not forgetting the other bearing, and we can slide that in. And seat that home, and that absolutely no movement at all, but still gives it a nice clean unobstructed rotation. And it just so happens that there is still a bit of movement on this edge, if you can see there, and luckily for me, it says not being able to get it out, there we go, I've found that just one of these big, I'm not sure if they're M4 or M5 washers, fits nicely over. And then slots nicely in. And a little fiddly, but not that bad. And then we've got no movement at all in the rear axle. So to me, something worth doing, but entirely up to you. The only other thing then is to install this planetary gear, which I did test and it's fine. But obviously it needs greasing up, and then the only other thing is to put the other half of the axle on. Again, I've gone round with some anti-wear grease, and it's 8 screws. Step 17 is attaching the rear body mounts. And holy moly, now that's a long screw for a 1/10 scale kit. 23 and the start of metal parts bag E is basically centering the servo and adding the servo saver. You need to put a ball joint on the back facing backwards like so, and as you can see I've already fitted the servo saver, because it depends what servo you've got, will depend on which parts you need on either B7 or B8. So that's the servo saver installed. We can then move on to step 24, but before we start this I've hit a problem. I was just making up the servo steering arm and found that one of the plastic ball joint connectors does that. I don't know what's happened. It's the first one ever I've had on a brand new Tamiya kit that just won't screw in. So whether it was just a bad batch, I don't know. But unfortunately the kit doesn't come with any spares of these. Sometimes you get one or two spares, but in this case it doesn't. So I'm going to use some glue. Now I've never done this before, but I have been told that apparently super glue will hold the bits but won't affect the plastic. So here's a good time to give it a try. This isn't ordinary super glue either. This is a really thick super glue, and it allegedly has gap filling properties. So I'm just going to screw that in, and this super glue as well doesn't set as quickly as ordinary super glue. It's not an instant set, so you can basically you have a bit of time to adjust the thing and get it in the right place before the glue sets. So I'm now going to leave that to set for 20 minutes or so. Maybe a good time to have a coffee, and we'll be back with you shortly. Okay, the glue's had time to set and it's solid now, and I've set the bar to the 32mm as specified in the manual. Step 28 is installing the rear wheels. Bit of a confession here. Came to fit the one, and this side came to fit this one, and because I'd put those spacers in, I couldn't pull this out far enough to get the steel bar through. So unfortunately I've just had to take the whole rear axle apart, and if you remember I used a really tiny spring that's like a mini key ring, and what I've ended up doing is cutting half a circle off it to thin it down a bit, and now it fits lovely. And as you can see, hopefully there's just enough play for me to get the steel pin in. And that completes step 28, and we've just got one more step to do on the chassis side, and that is to install part E2, which is the battery holder. Simply clicks in there. You've got this weird looking R clip, and it slips in like so. And with that, that completes my video on building the chassis side of it. I'm going to do a separate video on the shell, because there's a lot to it. Just looking at it here now, if you can see, hopefully, I don't know whether you'll be able to make it out, but there's like hundreds of holes I've got to cut into it. So I'm going to do a separate video for that. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you on the next one, doing the shell. Thanks for watching. Bye.